my husband's Canadian, and my extended family, we usually spend Christmas in Canada, at this town called Banff, where the book takes place. And Banff is just so amazing. First of all, it's dangerous, right? Because you have to go up this windy mountain road, and it's set in the mountains, and it gets really cold there, and you can get snowed in there. Like, there's just something inherently dangerous about it. But also in Banff, at the edge of town, there's this hotel called the Banff Springs Hotel, and it's literally a castle. It's 100 and some odd years old. It's made out of river rock and stone. It has turrets. When you're inside, like, there's like gargoyles in the eaves. It's dark. There's all these hallways, and you don't know if they go anywhere. Oh, and there was a murder suicide that took place in the hotel. That's like kind of on the down low. Like, people don't like to talk about it. Like, oh no, that never happened. And like, well, why is that room boarded up? Like, there's just creepy vibes. And then also, a woman got married there and fell down the stairs and died. So they say her ghost haunts the hotel. I'm like, okay, I gotta write a murder mystery that takes place in the hotel.
This week, I got to talk with a repeat guest of the podcast, Susan Walter. I guess we could probably start calling those friends of the podcast. We'll see. But if you have heard my interview with her or ever heard me talk about any of her books, they are so fast-paced and just like hook me from the get-go. And this one was no different. But this one is about Julie Adler. Julie Adler's perfect facade is shattered by grief when her husband commits suicide. His death reveals that their luxurious California life was a house of cards, and his secret business dealings have left Julie penniless. As she strikes out on her own, Julie feels drawn to her old stomping grounds in Banff, a charming and isolated ski town where she once trained for the Olympics. She finds work as a housekeeper at a luxury resort, but just as she starts to piece together a new life, an eccentric guest turns up dead. And Julie, the last person seen in her hotel room, is the prime suspect. The evidence is stacked against her, but even in the encroaching blizzard, Julie knows her way around these mountains. She just needs to evade the police long enough to find the truth behind the murder, and before the real killer finds her first. This was, it's action-packed. Like, there's just always stuff happening in like every chapter. I, in my review, said, like, Susan is the queen of multi-POVs, and she just is. It's so cool how she tells a story with 4 more POVs. It just, like, it's a really fun way to experience the whole story. This one was cool. It has the kind of Olympic athlete vibes to it that we don't have all the time in thrillers, but is really fun in thrillers. And definitely a how are we going to catch this killer in a really cool setting. So that being said, I'm going to stop talking about the book so you can hear about it from Susan. So I am super excited to talk about Running Cold for multiple reasons. Right now, maybe number one is the fact that it's still been in the 90s in Indiana. So it felt great to read somewhere that was cold. It was like making my dreams come true. But also because you just write. I think in my review I said you were the queen of multi-POV suspense. And you did it again.
Man, I love that, because how I see a story is not how you're going to see a story. And
right.
I confess, the first book that I read that had multi-POVs was The Guest List by Lucy Foley, which I absolutely loved. And I didn't know it was possible to have so many characters and so many different voices. And I'm like, well, if she did it, I want to try it. And that's been my go-to format since then.
Okay, so that is a really cool, like, invisible thread here, because I'm working on a book right now. And after I read, because I read one, I can't remember which, I read Over Her Dead Body first, was the first one of yours that I read. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. And then at the time, Lie by the Pool was about to come out. So then I read that, and then that was the one we've talked about. But I remember after I interviewed you and we talked about how you did like the multi-POV, I told my husband, I was like, I think I've been hung up on like not doing multi-POV, but like I was like, I think I actually need all these people with perspectives. and I love how she did it. So like then that made me kind of switch into third omniscient for this one part of the story and like fixed it for me. So a
Don't you
little
love
chain
that?
of that going on. Yeah.
I mean, another person who does it so well and so simply is Liv Constantine. Did you read The Last
Mm,
Miscarriage? Like the first half of
yes.
the book is told in first person POV, and it's a character going through a thing, and she's devious and she has a plan, and you're like on board for her ride, and you're like love to hate
Mhm.
her. And then they flip into her, the point of view of her antagonist. And
Yes.
that person also has an agenda. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute. And it's like, it gave me chills. So that's
Yes.
one of my favorite books for how you think you know the story and you think you know who the bad guy is. And then flip.
Yes.
So
And
good.
it's also like I always love knowing that like that would make me want to read a book if you told me that, but it's also really fun when like maybe it's just cuz it's not a book that's been really buzzy, but when you get to that moment and you turn the page and you're in like the antagonist perspective, there's like no better feeling. You just have to like put your book down and sit for a second and be like, "Oh boy, this is only half of it."
Right? Because when you go through life, it's like, I only know my
Yeah.
own narrative, but I'm the villain in
Yeah.
somebody's narrative. I know I am. Right. And
Totally.
so
Yeah.
walk a mile in their shoes now.
Right.
Make it
That's
your
what I
own.
think is so interesting, which we went through like I feel like we went through a renaissance of anti-hero characters when like Dexter and Breaking Bad, I feel like that was when people started really talking about anti-hero. But what you're saying, I think is what's fun about anti-heroes or morally gray heroes sometimes is that like when you're in their perspective though, all of a sudden maybe you understand why they're doing what they're doing. So it's kind of like we all only know our certain perspective, and then it's fun to do that with books as well and flip it.
Yep. Yeah, I read a
Yeah.
lot. I read a lot of. I feel like multi POV now is really caught on. It was new.
Yeah.
I had trouble finding a publisher for Good as Dead, which is my first multi POV book,
Hmm.
and some editors were like, "No, it's too many POVs." And Lucy's Foley's book had just come out, and I think it was on the New
Yeah,
York Times bestseller list. Um,
I think so.
but it wasn't accepted as a form. It took a little while.
Yeah. I feel like I hope I'm remembering this correctly, but I feel like Lori Brand said the same thing because hers is also one that is many POVs.
Right.
Like I don't even know how many, because there are just some short people like appearances or whatever. But I feel like she said the same thing. Where like at first, I feel like I had a conversation with her about this. That initially people were saying like I think that's too many points of view, and now currently she's like I feel like I see it more. So it is
Okay.
interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like it works so well for not that it doesn't for other genres, but I feel like it works so well for thrillers because then like you still can't always tell who means what based on whose head you're in the moment. So I think it like adds suspense for thrillers at least.
And also, it's a little bit of a crutch because there are things you need to reveal that your main protagonist may not be able to see, may not have access to.
Yeah.
So if you're writing in
Hmm.
first person, it takes a lot of skill to just write 350 pages from one POV and get all the
Yeah, that's
information
a good
in
point.
there. So I
Yeah.
think it's easier.
Well, I mean, obviously I read a variety, so I'm like always excited. There's obviously been like first person books I've loved too, but yours are so fun because it's like people's allegiances and stuff. Like you think one thing and then you're like, "Oh, I'm in this person's head now and actually there's something else going on." I'm not going to talk around spoilers, but all of that being said, was there anything different about writing this novel for you?
So, Running Cold is the first time I went into the POV of a detective. So, it's not
Hmm.
a police procedural, and I didn't
No.
plan to go into her POV. And then I got there and I was like, oh, I need to follow the process of solving this case and how the clues are
Yeah.
presenting themselves. And so that was a little intimidating because I'm not a detective. I've written FBI and
Yeah.
federal prosecutors in my other books, but never from their point of view. So that honestly, I read a lot of police procedurals. I read an author called Tessa Weggert. I don't know if you know her. She
Yes.
um, has a series that's set up in the Thousand Islands that's also
Hmm.
cold. So we have that in
Yeah.
common. But she writes,
Yes.
she's not a detective. She doesn't have that background. She
Hmm.
writes it so, so well. Her main character is a detective. And I was like, okay, I'm going to read all her books, which I had already read a few of them, but I read more.
Hmm.
And just to sort of trust myself that I could think like a detective. But I did a thing where the detective in Running Cold is inexperienced. So
Yeah.
to make it easier for me, but also to make it more interesting because she makes mistakes and there's things she doesn't know.
Yeah.
And she's never solved a
Uh-huh.
murder before. So
Right.
maybe that was a little bit of a cheat, but it worked for me.
I liked it. Well, and in some ways, I guess, though, you don't always get that perspective. So it also made it like you don't always get the new police officer very often. So it's kind of fun to just experience it that way. It was kind of funny when she is like approaching a crime scene and like, I can't remember what she thinks it probably is, but like definitely not a murder. And then all of a sudden she's like, wait, I'm going to a murder. But I'm sure that's also like a lot of more police officers experience is like most of them aren't dealing with murders all the time either.
Well, right. And she's also a small town cop, right? And it's this
Yeah.
town and it's not something she's ever encountered. And now
Hmm.
she's the detective and she has to figure it
Yeah.
out. And she doesn't know the protocol. She doesn't know what to do. And so
Yeah.
there's a teeny bit of comedy in that in her inner
Hmm.
monologue where she's like, was I supposed to call the medical examiner or does the chief call the
Yes.
medical examiner? She's like, dang it, I wish I knew what to do here. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, I had fun with her. And in the end, I just
Hmm.
listened to the audiobook and the
Nice.
narrator for that. I have four narrators because I have four POVs. And it's great when you're listening to an
Nice.
audiobook because you get some variety. It mixes it up. But
Yeah.
also you can really feel when you're in a different POV because it's a different voice actor. And she's so good.
Yes.
She's so good. She gets the humor
Oh, that's
just right.
amazing.
And so the
Oh,
audiobook, I'm very happy with that.
well, all the audiobook people need to listen to it that way now. I might just have to listen to just to hear it. What was your inspiration for this one, or what was like the first like thought that like you had about the book?
Okay, so two things. My first three books all take place in LA because I live in LA
Mhm.
and it's just kind of pulsing through my veins. And I know a lot of different parts of LA, and LA is huge. But for this
Yeah.
one, my family, my husband's Canadian, and my extended family, we usually spend Christmas in Canada at this
Mm.
town called Banff, where the book takes place. And Banff is just so amazing. First of all, it's dangerous, right? Because you have to go up this windy mountain road, and it's set in the mountains, and it gets really cold there, and you can get snowed in there.
Mhm.
Like there's just something inherently dangerous about it. But also
Mhm.
in Banff, at the edge of town, there's this hotel called the Banff Springs Hotel, and it's literally a castle. It's 100 and some
It
odd
is.
years old. It's made out of river rock and stone. It has turrets. When you're inside, like there's like gargoyles in the eaves. It's dark. There's all these hallways, and you don't know if they go anywhere. And I'm like, oh man. Oh, and there was a murder suicide that took place in the hotel. That's like
Oh.
kind of on the down low, like people don't like to talk about it, like, oh no, that never happened. And like, well, why is that room boarded up? Like there's just creepy vibes. And then also a woman got married there and fell down the stairs and died. So they say her
Oh my
ghost
gosh.
haunts the hotel. I'm like, okay, I gotta write a murder mystery that takes place in the
Yes.
hotel. And then so that was one inspiration, was just the place, because the place is unique and so so cool. And the other inspiration was, I don't know if your viewers have seen a movie called The Fugitive with Harrison Ford and
Mhm.
Tommy Lee Jones, but Harrison Ford is accused of killing his wife, and then he escapes arrest in a dynamic scene involving a
Yeah.
train crash. Um, and then he goes on the run and he's like trying to solve the murder while the cop is looking for him to haul his ass back to jail. So
Yeah.
I thought, I love that movie. I've seen it like 5 times, but I'm like, it's men.
Mhm.
I need to do it with women, and I need to do it
Yeah.
in Banff in a snowstorm. So I call it
Yes.
The Fugitive, but with chicks in a snowstorm. So
I love that
imagine, we
comparison.
have the detective character who's looking for our fugitive, and
Mm-hmm.
they're in a bit of a cat and mouse trying to outsmart one another. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so those were my two inspirations: the town and that
That is
movie.
really
Sorry,
cool.
but I did steal a little bit. I'm a thief.
That's okay. Um, yeah, so the location, it was cool that it was real too, because when it is, then I Google it and then I can see it even more. So that's all like it's easier to visualize basically.
Well, that's the
And
cover. The
so
cover is the actual
yes.
town
Oh, it's that
at night.
high.
So anybody
Oh, that
who's
is
been there will
so cool.
recognize. Yeah.
That's even cooler. Yeah, I
Yeah.
wouldn't have known. Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah. I was very
That's
happy that they
amazing.
that they chose that cover. I don't have any say in the covers.
Yeah.
The first one they showed me had a woman's face on it, and
Hmm.
I'm like,
No.
or we could do the town, and they're like, yeah, we have a mock-up for that, and then they sent it. I was like, no, that's it.
Oh, that's awesome. I okay, well, I love that little extra detail for
There's
everyone you
also
heard
a
it
map,
here. Oh yeah.
which is not in the arc. I don't know if you got an arc or a really.
I got an arc. Well, I
So,
have a net galley.
so in the really, there's a map, which is the actual town.
Nice. That's awesome. Well, yeah, it's super atmospheric. And actually like everything you were just saying there, I was like, it's actually gothic. Like I didn't end up including that in my review. Like it basically didn't run through my mind until you were also pointing out like gargoyles and people have died on their wedding days. So like it's also very gothic, but it's also atmospheric because like you feel that you're in a cold, mountainy Canadian town. There's definitely both of those things going on, but I loved it as a location. And I also love that it's the fugitive but women. And once you said that, I was like, it is. That is what the tension is, especially in the like second act, especially.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's nothing better than seeing two smart women face off against each other,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they're both want the truth, right? They both want the same thing. So
Yes.
that was
Yeah.
done right.
Yep. Well, I was about to say spoiler, so I'm gonna switch directions. So I follow you, so I know I've seen that you've been on a few ski trips yourself recently. So did you already love skiing going into this book, or were those all your first research trips?
No, I've been a skier for many years. I would say I was gonna make her just a straight downhill skier, and it was actually
Mm,
my husband. So the main character is Julie, and she's a biathlete, and so
mm-hmm.
a lot of people don't know the biathlon, but I do describe it in the book. And it's a sport, it's a winter sport where they combine cross country skiing, so skate skiing for speed, and then when your heart rate's up and you're sweating and you've just gone as fast as you can, you have to plop down and fire at a target. And your heart rate is elevated. It's a unique sport, and it emerged from,
It's wild.
yeah, no, it emerged from once upon a time in parts of the world. Like that's how they fought wars, is if you're
Mm,
on the front line in a snowstorm, and it was like Finland and Russia and inclement weather and freezing cold weather, they had to train
mhm.
to fire rifles while on skis. And so they just
Wow.
created a sport around it, which is not the weirdest sport. My daughter sent me an Instagram reel about hobby horse competitions. So
Oh wow.
that to me is a little weirder.
That
but
one's special.
but it is kind of weird. Like you're skiing with a rifle and then you
Yeah.
down and take a shot. But I don't want to give anything away. But
Right.
yes, she still knows how to use a rifle, and we may
Yeah.
bring the rifle back into it.
Yeah. Actually, I loved that. So I'll leave it at that, what you're talking about. Um the Olympic part though. So I'm assuming like do you do cross country skiing yourself or what like how did you learn about Olympic biathletes and like what they do?
Yeah, I've been around skiers and skiing my
Okay.
almost my whole life. I'm from Massachusetts, and we used to go to New Hampshire and Vermont and Maine for skiing. And then when I moved out west, I married a Canadian, and so I'm often in Canada skiing. So I already, I've experienced skiing in my physical body, and I've watched a lot of
Mm.
skiing, and I just think skiing is cool, man.
Yeah, it is.
And it's
Yeah, you're
easy
like,
thing,
why
like,
not
and
put
you don't
thriller around
see
it?
it a lot, right? When you write and
Hmm.
read a lot of suspense thrillers, it's really hard to find a new arena,
Yeah,
right? Like, how
it
many
is.
husband wife cat and mouse things have you heard, and ex-wife
I
and
know.
ex-girlfriend and family stuff and things set in New York or LA? And I was like, I gotta try something different.
Yeah, I did like that part about it because then it just feels fresh. Also, then just because it is. But it was actually why, which I just brought up Lori Brand, but that was like another comp I had because you're right, it's a really unique book. So there's not like tons of literal comps for it of books that I had read, but I included Lori Brand's Bodies to Die For because it was the same thing where like she told a thriller in the world of like women bodybuilding and also multiple POVs all the way throughout. So there were some similarities, but it is fun to like read thrillers where like obviously like you had a niche interest because you've done it for so long, and then Lori had a niche interest because she
Hmm.
had done it for so long. So it's kind of cool to get to like experience other people's worlds through a thriller.
Yeah, and another book that inspired me, Ali Reynolds, who wrote a book called Shiver, and it's
Yeah.
about a reunion of an Olympic snowboarding squad who,
Yes.
there's a mystery of how they kind of fell away, but then they
Mm-hmm.
call for a reunion, and it's in the
Yep.
French Alps, and it's snowy, and someone's trying to get revenge for something that happened in the past. And that was another book that I just really loved. What made it original
Yes.
for me was the setting, and the fact that they were Olympians, and being an Olympian, like, to perform at that level, like, you're intense. If you've competed in the
Exactly.
Olympics, you're very hardworking, you're very focused, and it's cutthroat, and it's
Mm-hmm.
elevated in that way. So that's another reason
Yeah.
I made my protagonist a former Olympian, because I
Yes.
wanted to exploit those character traits.
Yeah. Yep. I love Shiver. That was my other comp, actually. So like in my post, those were the two that I brought up.
Oh, that's
But
cute.
it was that same experience when I read that book where I was like, I remember my algorithm. I totally forgot about this until now. My algorithm thought I was like truly into snowboarding because all of a sudden I was getting snowboarding on my Instagram and my TikTok because Ali Reynolds includes like so many like tricks, like actually describes the things that they're doing, which have left my mind by now, as they're snowboarding. So I would like kind of Google it to see the visual. And so then for a while, all my ads were like for snow gear. And I'm like, no, I'm not adventurous. So, but it's fun. It's fun getting to like have stuff that you learn more about. And like you're saying, it felt really original reading both of those books because it wasn't like a wealthy family behaving badly on vacation, which I still love sometimes, but it was really unique. Um, did you have a favorite point of view to write? Does that ever happen? Is there one that like you just like enjoy?
In all my books, I feel like I have one kind of rebellious comedic point of view.
Mm.
So in this one, Julie, the Olympiads, her best friend is Izzy, and Izzy's a new mom, and she's kind of stumbling over herself, and um, she likes to party, but she's fun, but she's definitely flawed, and she's done some not nice things. But her voice is is more frothy and fun. So I feel
Yeah.
like in all my books, I do have one sort of comedic relief character. In Lie by the Pool was
Mm-hmm.
probably Sophie.
Mm-hmm.
Who's a little bit sassy and rebellious and has a sense of humor. Um, in Over Her Dead Body, it was Winnie, right? And she's the sister character, and she's um, got a drinking problem, but she's self-deprecating about it. And then in Good as Dead, I
Mm-hmm.
had a 16-year-old girl who is just mouthy, and that was,
Yes.
so those characters for me, I feel like they had some levity, and
Yeah.
humor in what can sometimes be a really dark journey. And I think, I
Yeah.
read Leanne Moriarty, and I love Big Little Lies, and I love the humor she inserts in her books.
Mm-hmm.
So in all the seriousness and dread, I do like to have some comic relief, and I kind of emulated Leanne Moriarty a little bit when I created those characters.
Yeah. I think she did it a lot too in Apples Never Fall. Like, I read it a while ago, but I feel like because you were in the POV of all of the family by the end of it, something like that. And there was like I remember experiencing like humor through the mom's perspective as a mom. And then like there would be something funny in the daughter's perspective about the same situation. And
Yep.
you're like, oh, they're just both experiencing different things.
Yeah, like I have to laugh a little bit when it's also
Yeah,
very technical writing a murder mystery, right? Like you have to have the
I
pieces
bet.
all fall into place. Like it's kind of like a math problem, when to reveal
Mm-hmm.
stuff, or a puzzle, maybe
Right.
it's a better
Right.
metaphor. So sometimes I just want to like tell a joke, say
Right.
something funny.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. And Izzy was fun to read. She was funny. Her chapters were great. She really did have some like one-liner thoughts that she kept to herself.
But she's also trying to be a better person.
Yeah.
And I think you can write a really flawed character sympathetically as long as they're self-aware that
Hmm.
they hurt somebody by their behavior. I don't want to give it away, but she's not always
Yeah.
been a good friend.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, she is not.
I felt like I had to have that layer in there to build out the friendship, so it wasn't one
Hmm.
dimensional.
Yeah. Did you know who it was going to be as you were writing it, or did you surprise yourself with who was behind it all?
Okay, I love that question because every time I write a book, every single time, I have a very loose outline. I mean, very loose, but I'm like, I know who the afflicted is and who the afflictor is, right? And I always change it.
Right.
Always.
Every time.
Yeah, so in this one, I did not know who it was. I didn't pick the wrong person in the beginning, but I didn't know
Hmm.
how it was all going to come together
Yeah.
when I started writing. But I created stakes for all the characters and emotional components of the characters
Yes.
so that you would believe when it rises to that level of murder. Like, how do you get
Hmm.
somebody to the level of murder? That's the thing that is always the challenge, right? Because you meet
Yeah.
somebody and you want to be sympathetic toward them and they want to behave like a real person. But murdering somebody is like a big deal. You're gonna have
I
to be
know.
pushed really hard. Love,
Yes.
money, embarrassment, like what are the
Yeah.
things
Yes.
that are going to drive someone to murder? And so as I
Yeah.
write the characters and I try to ground them, I
Hmm.
create seeds in all of them, right? Because you have to, as a mystery writer, make more than one person credible of murder.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
this one I didn't know. In in a in my next novel, I even changed who died. That one's I can't talk about that one yet because it's still at a
Whoa.
very very early stage. But
Uh-huh.
like I thought I was going to kill one character, and then I liked her so much. I'm like, I can't kill her. My readers are
Oh
going to
my
be
gosh.
mad. And I don't know. Have you read a book where you're like just really mad that they killed a character that you really like?
Oh yeah. Hmm.
Like Downton Abbey when they just kept killing everybody. I'm
Oh
like,
yeah, they did.
right? And you're like, how could you just kill that person?
You're
Everyone's
like, this
like,
is
she's the
Downton
reason.
Abbey.
Right? I watched
Yeah.
the show and you killed her? What?
Yeah.
No.
Yes. Yeah, that is so strange.
So I'm trying to think of
Well,
if there was a book
that's
that,
cool. You're saving someone in your next book.
yeah. I'm like, I was going to kill her, but no, I can't. And I
Yeah.
don't know, I may rewrite that book and go back and kill her, but in the moment I can't.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so but then with this one, did you say what it was with this one?
I
Did you
just
know
didn't
with this one?
decide. I wanted to build out the world.
Oh, that's what you said.
And
Yeah.
then when I got there, I was like, yeah, I think I know who's going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's fun. It's fun to discover as you go.
Mm-hmm. That's what I've definitely talked to people who say it's more fun to surprise themselves as they're writing.
I find if I have it too outlined strictly,
Mm-hmm.
um, I get bored and the writing gets boring.
Mm,
I also
yeah.
get into trouble because sometimes the characters just come through in a specific way as I'm writing them. And then if I've
Yeah.
already decided what they're going to do, but they're coming through in a different way and that behavior
Hmm.
isn't credible anymore, then I find myself in
Yeah,
trouble. I'm like, wow, the way that
that's
this
true.
character's coming in, I can't create a bridge to that behavior.
Mm,
So
yeah.
I actually talked to David Baldacci about that a little bit because he never
Oh yeah.
outlines. And he's written what, 70 books?
Like not at all.
He does not outline. He says, how
Wow.
can you make decisions for characters that aren't created yet? You have to live with them, right?
I kind of get that feeling lately. Yeah, because I thought I would be an outliner like hardcore. I just like assumed because of the way my personality is, I'm like I'm gonna have to do it. And then it was just keeping me from writing. And then when I just knew like six things to hit, I was just like writing in between it. And then like you're saying, I got to know the characters as I wrote them.
Yeah. I was also, I felt huge relief. I was talking to the author, Wendy Walker, who wrote What
Oh yeah.
Remains, and like she's brilliant. And I was like, oh my God, I'm terrified because I wrote this character and I was gonna make her a murderer, and now it doesn't feel right. She's like, "Oh, I do that all the time." It's like I've changed
Wow.
too, and so now I've got David Baldacci on one hand and Wendy Walker on the other. I'm
Nice.
like, okay, very accomplished writers do find themselves
Yeah.
in the same predicament, so I'm not alone,
Hmm.
and I'm just gonna trust it.
Yeah. I mean, that's like been the interesting, one of the more interesting things about the podcast is just hearing how many different ways you can write a book. Like, just hearing everyone's different processes and that like there definitely isn't one true version because people have had success doing it so many different ways.
You can kind of feel when something has been intricately outlined. Um,
Mm,
I always say, like, I read a Riley Sager book, the one about the house on the cliff, that falls into
yes.
the
The only one
yeah.
left.
And I feel like there were so many intricately plotted twists and turns that
Hmm.
felt like an outlined book to me. I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
Riley, so
Yeah.
he may watch this and be like, no, that's I follow my instinct too.
It was just your experience with it.
But my experience, like that, felt very meticulously outlined
I would
because
agree.
things were layered, and that's also,
Hmm.
that's a great skill to have if you could write
Hmm.
that way. I just don't write that
Yeah.
way. Maybe I
Yeah.
have like a little bit of like I get bored too easily.
Yeah. Well, and because I think a lot of your chapters kind of end on not like cliffhangers, but like reveals.
Mm,
Like it's there's something you're pointing out by the end. So I feel like you're like, okay, done with that point, move on to the next person. So probably like it's just how you like writing it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I loved it.
Thank
And
you.
truly, as someone who is not made for summer, I loved getting to be in winter in September.
I love winter. I get a little
Yeah.
claustrophobic in summer because if it gets too
Yeah.
hot, like I don't want to go out. I don't
Mm,
want to open the door and
no.
let the heat in. Like I
Yeah.
don't really
And
like air
it's so
conditioning.
humid. Yeah.
Like I feel like it's, I don't know, like fake air.
I know. I am a fall winter girly for the most part.
Right? You can leave the windows open and it's, you can
Yes.
snuggle under a blanket with your dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Ah, it's coming. You don't really it doesn't get that cool for you though if you're in LA, right?
It gets in the 40s and 50s and at
Oh,
night.
okay.
So
Nice.
it's sweater weather. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, yeah, it's definitely
Yeah.
sweater weather, but it doesn't snow. But we do go to
No,
Canada. I
no,
still
no.
have to go see family in Canada, and I love Canada.
Nice.
And I do love to put on my winter boots and my hat.
Yeah. You made me want to go to Canada. So I'm sure anyone else who reads it will feel that way too. Um, I think we have some reading interest in common from what we post about. Is there anything you've read recently that you loved?
That I love. Right now, I have to look at my my Kindle. Um, I'm reading Chris Whitaker's All the Colors of the Dark right now. Did you read it?
Yeah. No, I need to.
Um,
Everyone's talking about it.
Everyone's talking about it. I'm going to reserve opinion for it because I don't know. I feel like books take on this like bigger than life
Mm-hmm.
persona, and then sometimes the expectation is so high,
I know. Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of not fair to the author. Like I just it sometimes you love like I didn't know about Allie Reynolds when I discovered Shiver. I just liked the title. I didn't know anything
Yeah.
about it, and I felt
Yep.
like more excited about it because I got to discover it.
Yep.
Um,
I know what you mean.
and I want to read. I'm going to buddy read All Fours by Miranda July, which is not a thriller.
All
All Fours, isn't it
all
called?
fours.
Yeah, it's like a really controversial women's lit book that's
Ooh,
like been
okay.
all over the New York Times.
Oh,
Um,
I know it sounds familiar.
and I feel like I have to read it. Oh, you know what I loved? Loved
What?
the audiobook was Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers.
Oh yeah.
Did you read
I
that?
haven't read it.
If
Mm-mm.
you're an audiobook person, it is so elevated by the narration. Like
Oh, that's
laugh
cool.
out loud funny because of the voice talent. And I that was one of the most enjoyable reads. And normally I listen to thrillers at like 1.25 or 1.5 time.
Yeah.
But I so enjoyed listening to that in real time because of the comedic cadence of the narrator. That book I really, really
That's
enjoyed.
cool.
Yeah. I read a
Nice.
lot of outside my genre lately and nonfiction,
That's cool.
um, just to shake it up.
I get it. Sometimes you just need to.
And I read some arcs
Mm.
like early, but that I can't say. But Samantha
Yeah.
Bailey has a new one that I got to
Yes.
read
Cross
super
my heart.
early. No, she's got a new one,
Oh, a new one.
and it's not
Ooh.
even in production yet. And I got to read that, and it's so good. It takes place.
Oh,
I don't know
that's
if I'm allowed to talk
exciting.
about it, but it takes place behind
Yeah.
the scenes. It's a murder behind the scenes of a TV show, and it's so good.
Oh, that's so up my
I'm sorry,
alley.
Sam, if I'm not allowed to talk about it, but it's so
I'll put a marker and we'll remove it if we need to. That sounds super exciting. Yeah. It is sometimes it's fun to switch it up with genres, but then like sometimes I'm like, "Oh, why did I do this?" It's like 50-50 for me. Like I still try to read outside it. And then sometimes you're like, "Oh, I'm just meant to read thrillers."
I feel you. Yeah, I go in
Yeah.
and out.
Yeah.
Like sometimes
Like I'm not against it. I'm just it doesn't always work for me.
I feel like I want to read the big books, um,
Mhm.
like All the Colors of the Dark that everyone's talking about. I feel like I
Yeah.
have to
And
read.
God of the Woods. Those are the two.
Yeah, it was like this thick. I'm like, my
And they're
feelings
both
is
500
300 pages. I'm
pages.
like, what?
I know. And like, I just somehow didn't hear about them. So I just didn't request them on NetGalley. And at the time that they came out, I had a bunch, which like I read a lot of great books from NetGalley that in that time. But then by the time I was like back to like not reading for podcasts or for NetGalley, then I saw that they're both 500 pages. And I'm like, when am I going to fit these in?
What are you reading now? What are you up to?
So right now I am reading what did I oh no. Well, I just finished it this morning. The Return of Ellie Black.
Oh,
It was a book of the month pick and it's like a really good dark atmospheric missing girl story is like the short of it.
okay.
I loved it. It was very good. I to your point about like not wanting to like put too much expectations on a book. I had seen a bunch of reviews that were like, and the twists are crazy. And I just want to say, I loved this book, and it was dark and atmospheric, and the character work is really great. The pacing is really good. There aren't like twists. So don't think you're the whole time I was like waiting for my mind to be like completely shattered. And I was like, oh, okay, it was some reveals.
Got it. Okay. Noted.
Yeah. But yeah, it's really good. She's really talented
Okay, I'll check it out.
for sure. Yeah. Well, where should people follow you to stay up to date on everything?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm pretty active on Instagram, so it's Susan Walter
Mhm.
Author on Instagram. And I have a website too if you just want to see, read my blurbs and see what books I have, and that's susanwalterwriter.com. So that's
Awesome.
mostly for information about like what's coming up or and I have a newsletter. You can sign up on my website,
Oh,
and I'm doing some like massive giveaways because I have a book coming out in
ooh,
October, and then I have another book coming out next spring. There's going to be a lot of giveaways that are announced in my newsletter. So I know, like my
nice.
inbox is full of newsletters, and they're all so delightful. But I could
Oh yeah.
spend all day reading newsletters. And now there's
Oh my gosh, I
Substack,
know.
and a lot of my friends are on
Substack too.
Substack, and
Yeah.
I'm like, there's so much to read. So I
I
totally
know.
respect like if you don't want another newsletter, but
Yes.
then just follow me on Instagram. You'll see pictures
Yeah.
of my dog. You can see some pictures of Banff and skiing and snow, and it's not all books all the
Yes.
time. And then you have to read a newsletter, which can be a lot.
Yeah. I'm gonna go sign up. I like them. I'm just like, oh, I'm just looking at my email, just like reading everyone's thoughts each morning.
Well, I always give away things in my newsletter that you won't find anywhere
Nice.
else. So,
Nice.
and I collect them from other authors. I went to go see Laura Dave yesterday, but they canceled the
Ooh.
event last minute. Um, but I was gonna get her to sign. I bought her book, and I was gonna get her to sign it to give away. So
Yeah.
that will be coming. She's gonna reschedule, and so that will be coming. So I go and see
Oh,
like
that's
the big
good.
authors. They all kind of come through LA at some point. So
Mm-hmm.
I buy their books and get them signed and give them away. Like after I read them.
Nothing wrong with that.
But my bookshelves are too full. I don't know if you can see
Yes.
them, but so I mean, books are meant to be shared. But I do get
Mm-hmm.
myself in trouble because I'll read a book and it'll be like so good, and then I want to go look back in it, and I was like, oh, I gave it away.
Like, never mind. Someone else has it.
Yeah, but I mean, I
Well,
feel
that's
like
cool.
as an author, you gotta share other authors' works, read them,
Yes.
and if you enjoy them, um, give them to somebody. Get it signed
Mm-hmm.
by your friends. I did a giveaway with Lori Brand where she signed a book and gave it away. I did a giveaway
Nice.
the month before that with Lucinda Berry,
Nice.
because she's my friend, and I had two of her books
She
signed,
is
and
amazing.
I gave those away through my newsletter. And Laura Dave is next if they reschedule her event.
Nice. Hopefully they do.